That's the fun table back there. We decided.
All the girls probably.
Good, good. Enjoying the next couple days of rain. Pulled my trailer into the garage and I'm working on it while it's dry inside there.
There you go. Ready, Sammy? Call the city council meeting to order for September 12th, 2023.
Or October.
Oh, it is October. Oh my gosh, where did September go? It is October. Well, you fooled me at 6:04. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance first. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Well, welcome. I hope you're all warm and dry. Sammy, will you do roll call, please?
Yeah, Mayor Bell,
Here?
Counselor Smith,
Here.
Counselor Wells,
Here.
Counselor Lehman,
Here.
Counselor Blaine is absent, Counselor Fox.
Here.
And Counselor Engelbretson. We do have a quorum.
Welcome, everyone. Under mayor comments, I want to just go over a couple of things. First of all, I want to let you know that I have appointed Adam Hanks to be our voting delegate for the League of Oregon Cities Conference. Thank you, Adam, for filling in. Often that's the mayor that does it. I am not going to that conference because I went to the Oregon Mayors Association Conference in August. So Adam will be representing us there, and I'm sure representing us well. I did want to read a thank you note from Ann Heath that came to City Council. So I have to unsnap here, sorry. Put everything together so I don't lose it. It's not a long note, so I'll go quick. She says, "Dear Coburg City Council members, it has been a joy working with you. I bragged about you so much because you were so cohesive and hardworking. It was a joy serving you. Thank you for the euros to get me started. I can't wait to spend them. It will mean I finally made it to Portugal. I wish you and the city of Coburg all the best and will always appreciate the opportunity to serve you. Thank you, Anthony." I did want to share that with you. I could have just passed it around, I guess, but somehow it seemed more appropriate to share it. I want to let you know after our work session in September that we included the planning commission in, we talked about bus service to Coburg. And little did I know that we actually have a representative on LTD for Coburg and the North Eugene area. And I was in another, some transportation meeting, I can't remember which one, and it came up. And so I said, well, who's our representative? And they told me. And so I reached out to her and we have a meeting set up on November 16th, if I remember correctly, to talk about what is bus service to Coburg, how can we improve it, what are the needs of Coburg, and they're quite responsive. So I was impressed about that and I wanted you to know that. I'm sure that Mr. Hanks will go over the changes that we're having in Springbrook, possible upgrades to city and public services, but I just wanted to highlight that there's lots of work being done there. And we've had conversations in this group about, did we need another software program or what is happening? There have been a lot of upgrades to Springbrook that I know will be shared with you. There was one other thing, as I was going through a list of projects that are currently going on in Coburg, I was struck with the number of existing projects. And this impacts public works and it also impacts planning, but it impacts every department in Coburg. There are 24 existing projects currently going on, obviously, if they're existing. And there are 7 new projects. So that will be coming online fairly shortly. So when people say, gee, what's happening in Coburg, you can say there are 24 existing projects and at least 7 new ones that are coming up very soon. I know that within our packets, we received information on mandatory reporting, and I just wanted to touch on that really quickly. With the passage of House Bill 3071 during the 2021 legislative session, all elected officials are required to report suspected child abuse. And since we're all elected officials, that means us. There is a half-hour mandatory training that is online, and we'll share that website with you, and you can look. I don't want to take city council time. We could push it off and do it in the retreat if you all wanted to do that, but I think we'll just share that website with you and you can take a look at it. I looked at it, having been a mandatory reporter for years as a nurse, it seemed pretty basic to me, but always good information to review. Want to point out to you in the agenda review in the minutes of the last meeting, on page 2 of 8 of the consent agenda, it states Mayor Bell noted Terry Dawson, Colleen Marshall, and it's Elise, not Alyssa Landry. So Sammy has made those changes already in her records. And then on page 6 of 8, it said that the motion passed unanimously 6-0, and really it was 5-0. So because there were 5 of you here. So those are the only changes that I noted in the minutes, and which was remarkable because that was the first time that minutes taker had taken our minutes. So I think that is a credit to all. In the city administrator report is in the red folder and was also emailed to council. So you probably have had a chance to take a look at that. Sammy, are there any proposed changes to tonight's agenda other than that? No. Thank you. Is there anyone signed up for citizen testimony?
There is not.
There is not. Okay. Well, then we'll move on along, and so the consent agenda, counselors may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion by requesting such action prior to consideration. So I'll ask you to review the minutes of September 12th. If you have not already, and let me know if you have any changes or additions to those or any questions. At your convenience, I will consider a motion to approve.
Mayor, it'll be as amended, approving as amended.
As amended, yes, thank you so much for that.
I move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
So that was a motion by Counselor Engebretson and a second by Counselor Fox. All those in favor? Raise your hands. Okay, 5. Any opposed? better not be 0. So it is 5-0 and those are passed. Do we have any special guests tonight? No special guests. Shucks, I always hope for special guests. And on to the ordinances and resolution. I will remind you that we've talked a lot about transportation in our meetings. And so I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hanks, and he is going to go through the proposed resolution. We've had an informal transportation group for a number of months. And it seems prudent based on the feedback that we've gotten to move that along into a more formal group. So turn that over, but you have the floor.
All right. Yeah, the mayor and I were discussing kind of that informal group and looking at some of those long range things that we talked about in the work session, are really far out there. TSP is 2029. There's some other things, the bypass study is in 26. So we were talking about some of the shorter term things and how do we want to best address, review, prioritize, and implement kind of a short but important list of shorter term transportation safety issues. So in prior places and in many places, I've seen the use of ad hoc committees, and I think they've been used here as well. In general, ad hoc committees, I think, are really functional and a good use of both the community's time to participate on topics and in providing really good sounding board for staff. And then ultimately, obviously, having a recommendation to council to implement things. And typically ad hoc committees, they're designed to have a specific scope with a defined timeline for completion and kind of some specific deliverables to report back to council on. So it really kind of creates a nice box for short-term analysis and the ability to then get a plan of attack to implement. And so the list of things that staff with Brian and Larry and I and the rest of the team have all been talking about recently since I came aboard, there was a number of them that seemed really well suited to an ad hoc committee. So what's in front of you is a draft resolution. It comprises kind of how the formation of the committee, the charge, the issues to address, the deliverables, and the expected completion date. I'd be glad to go over kind of I think item 6 or section 6, excuse me, of the resolution kind of has at least the initial list. It's including but not limited to those items. But I think those items really will kind of take up the meat of a 6-meeting schedule, anticipated from January through June, and then probably a report to council in July. Could be that if everything goes smoothly. Those are items I think some have been talked about in meetings here. Some were talked about in those transportation kind of more informal group. But that's the nuts and bolts of the resolution is establishing the ad hoc and by charter, the mayor can technically by charter just establish one, but I think the kind of the preferred route is what we're doing tonight is to have a group conversation about it. The next steps should council be in agreement with the creation of the ad hoc would be to advertise the citizen openings on the committee over the next 20 or 30 days, bring back in the November meeting or possibly December, but hopefully November appointments to the committee and have the first meeting of the ad hoc in January. There's a possibility we could squeeze kind of a starter introductory meeting in December just to get the ball rolling, but for sure get into the meat of those items in January. And like I said, anticipating a report back to council and a set of recommendations and implementation, kind of a combination of the committee and staff's kind of cover on it in June, but most likely July.
I will entertain a motion and then we can answer questions if needed. Remember, we did the ad hoc committee, as many of you can attest, on the revision of the central business district zoning. Lots of work, good product, good outcome.
I was just curious about the process. We're gonna suggest a motion and then discuss it, or?
That's typically what we do, and then we'll vote. Well,
Move to approve a resolution creating the Transportation Safety Ad Hoc Committee.
Second.
there's a motion by Counselor Wells and a second by Counselor Fox to adopt the resolution 2023-15, a resolution creating a transportation safety ad hoc committee. Is there any discussion or questions?
Just briefly, I would, thank you, just say that, the things in section 6, the bullet points that the committee was gonna cover, I've heard many of these things discussed for many years in Coburg, so I'm happy that maybe we can move forward on some, especially the one that excites me because the law was changed in Oregon recently about vehicle speed limits. It used to be that we had no control over the speed limit on Pearl Street and Willamette Street because those are not city roads, but now the Oregon legislature did change that recently, and now there's a path for us to be able to weigh in on that, so that's exciting.
Yes. And hopefully we'll create a more cohesive speed throughout all parts of our city. Counselor Fox.
Well, I just wanna echo what Counselor Eggleston said, and I think this is a great idea. I was involved with the downtown Allen, and it was a great way to get other people involved by the city council, and it's a great process for bringing things in a timely fashion.
It seems like time. It really does seem like time to be able to move this forward. Any other questions or discussion?
Question is someone or any of us, all of us going to be on the committee as well?
The way it is written, the mayor will be on the committee, a counselor, at least one counselor, and then, so the committee, section 3, I'll read it. Committee shall be comprised of a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 7 voting members made up of the mayor, 1 city councilor, 1 planning commissioner, and up to 4 citizens. Yeah, well, that's okay. It was sort of buried in. Anything else?
Is there any plan to, if time allows or whatever, to discuss the neighborhood speed limits? I know there was talk a while back of reducing the speed limits in our neighborhoods from 25 to 15 or 20.
Yeah, I think that was my intention with that bullet. I did say a citywide residential, so that would include, I would
Okay.
hope that conversation would encompass that as well. Yeah.
Oh, I see that. Okay, thanks.
It says,
Lyman.
2 to 4 citizens. I'd really urge that we try to get 4. Maybe even geographically. In the city.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I wrote that just in case we didn't have 4, so we could get started and then add, as need be, or as we got applications. I didn't want to not be able to get the group going if we didn't have the 4 in time. So that was the intention of that, but I agree. I think 4 would be great.
And you can always invite people.
You're gonna have a hard time limiting it to.
We may. I think traffic is a hot button in this community, and as it should be. Anything else? Not, I will. I was gonna say I'll entertain a motion. I apologize for that. I will go ahead and we can have a vote. All those in favor? 5. And any opposed? Hearing none. The motion passes 5-0. Now we're into the public hearing portion of our meeting. And I will now open the public hearing is resolution 2023-16, a resolution adopting administrative surcharges, administrative fees, planning and development charges included in the 2023 City of Coburg fee schedule. And I will now open the public hearing at 6:22. On the resolution that I just said, and we will have a report from Mr. Hanks.
Yeah, this item is, as I understand it, and most communities do as well, kind of an annual review of a number of the fees throughout that this various city departments charge for services and activities, and it includes fines as well. Staff annually reviews those and for relevancy, adequacy, consistency with the intent of the fee. Typically in, I think, May or June of each year. It got a little behind this year in some of the transition stuff, I believe. Just a quick note that systems development charges, SDCs, and utility rates are not part of this annual process, and they're addressed individually and not necessarily on an annual review cycle. The fee adjustments that you see here in front of you are fairly minor in nature, and we're really focused on kind of some obvious things, some housekeeping, and some consistency of the naming convention and the fee titles, so they match with the ordinances that they created those fees.
So the changes in red, starting
Oh.
on page 23,
Mhm.
you can see where the naming conventions were changed. It took me a little bit
Oh.
to sort of figure that out as I went through the packet, so I thought I'd share my
Yeah.
confusion with you.
Yeah, thank you. In the packet, there are both. There's the fee schedule that is the adopted schedule, and then Sammy put together, which is really great to be able to compare what did get altered or is proposed to be altered, and that's in the red. So there are some fees that are stricken because they're redundant. They're shown in multiple places that were combined. Fairly minor alterations overall. I think when we went over this as a team, some of the fees to get more involved in kind of fee methodology and kind of to do any more significant restructuring. Some of them would actually involve ordinance changes along with them. So we plan on doing that over the winter and again, getting back on track to the May-June cycle. So in May and June, you'll probably see coming forward something with a little more significant proposed changes on them. Because that will also then have corresponding ordinance amendments likely with some of them. There's a number of them that I think when we dug into, we wanted to just get this done and completed for the year with the obvious items, and then really dig into it deeper and give you a more comprehensive look next late spring.
Any questions? Councilor Fox?
You mentioned fines. Where are fines in here?
They are just the classifications. There's nothing proposed to be changed in this round. The ordinance violation penalties there on, let's see, page 3. In the middle there, class A, B, C, and D, which is pretty common for cities to kind of match up the A, B, C, and D that goes with the state.
Mr. Lyman?
So under the notes, it says all fees are for actual city costs and include necessary administrative planning, public works, fire, CPR, and EPR time as per A-208-A. So are we required to document and itemize staff time to come up with these fees, or are we able to just assess a fee?
You can assess a fee. I think every community would have, or a city council would probably want different methodologies for different fee types. Some fees clearly would not be able to be charging the true cost, the true labor cost of those. They'd be cost prohibitive. They wouldn't accomplish, what they're intended. I think that often comes up in the land use side of things. There are some land use application types that that have many, many more hours, than what we could charge that would inhibit development. If you charge the true cost, I think that in the land use side, for example, there are often some methodology about how much does is it okay for the general fund to subsidize development, the cost of development? There are some cities that would set fees based on recapturing a certain percent of the overall cost of that program, of the current planning, current development program. And I've seen that range, from 10 or 20% cost recovery to 70 or 80% cost recovery. So it really kind of depends on the objectives, kind of that policy level objectives, and then we can build those out. When you're talking about fees for utilities, those are much more regulated and connected to the cost of providing that service, that commodity.
So perhaps we should change the language to say, because it's not all fees are for actual city cost.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's just a quote straight out of the ordinances. I think that's what you're referring to in the ordinances.
Yeah, and we'd have to look and see which did that apply in the originating ordinance for each of these fees? Was the council at that time looking specifically for the methodology to be actual? And then actual is also a bit negotiable in terms of, is it actual on average or actual? I mean, because it's impossible to be actual on every application because they're very different. A very simple sign permit could take hours and hours and hours. The next sign permit in the door could be 5 minutes. So I think the idea is really looking at it on an annualized basis as well. It'd be impossible to, unless you're doing the time meter kind of a approach, which very complicated.
We might change that language.
Yeah.
Again, based on our upcoming changes to estimated or, we can come up with something.
Right. And
else
some fees,
in that ordinance.
yeah, some fees would probably want to be based on as close to actual cost to provide that service, or regulatory review, and some might purposefully be reduced because you want to encourage that. So we're having some of those conversations at our staff leadership level, and kind of building up a more comprehensive review and proposals for you. Some of them simplification. There are probably some of these that are more separate fees than are necessary, and some could go away. There are some that are linked to like OLCC, for example. We have to look at what is the state doing, and are those fees still relevant for what our role in the OLCC review process is, because that has evolved. So some of those are based on kind of things above us.
Mandated.
Yes.
I have a question
Interesting.
under Public Works on page 4, where it talks about park structure reservations. Does that include at this point the ILF hall, since the city is now leasing that? Because that question came up today also at Main Streets. The idea is to start having that building generate income again. And so is that something that needs to be separate from the park structure, like on a hourly, half day, full day? Or is it included in this?
I don't know the answer to how it's being handled this immediate moment, but in our conversations with, MOU or contract with Main Street, my take would be that we would probably want to have a different schedule than what's embedded here. And I think, a park structure, IOOF building isn't a park structure. So I think we're not bound by that right now. This might be a convenient proxy until we get to that spot of having the contract in place. So we know better how we want to charge that. But I would think that would be kind of embedded in that conversation with the contract between city and Main Street.
And are the 60 and 75, is that per day, per hour, per half day? How?
4 hour.
blocks, thanks.
4-hour blocks.
Okay.
Council Fox.
Good question there. That was, us going back to John's, Council Lehman's, comment. And I didn't quite, grasp what you said, but can we just scratch actual and just say city cost? Or is that a required word?
I think we need to go back to the ordinance.
Yeah, I can remove, I'm sorry, Adam, is that
No,
okay?
go-
I
go
can
ahead.
remove that from this published fee schedule, just remove the whole thing and just put notes there. It is a note quoted out of the ordinance, so I can't change the verbiage of it.
Okay.
But one thing I did want to say, I think that too, when that was done, it was that's where the base fee came from. And I know that, so this, like Adam said, the sign permit, some of them take an hour, some of them take 3 hours, so it was kind of faced at that average. But like when we got into the large land use applications, that's when the tracking and stuff comes in with the, because it's a $10,000 application that could take, it is tracked by finance and then actually billed out.
I think the note section in general is somewhat of a kind of an added feature for council and staff when we publish it for, for the community, for the users that need that. They probably aren't too worried about that notes column, but it is connected to kind of the origins of the fees
So if I.
and isn't
understand
required by.
Correctly, we'll remove that from publication for the public. Dr. Lehman.
Not to be changed now, but perhaps next time we look at this, maybe there's some benefit to have a range on some of these, a minimum and a maximum, so that you have the discretion to say, because we do want to charge an appropriate amount that covers our staff time and our expenses, especially as we're looking to try to generate more revenue. So on some of these could be a range.
Yeah, I think we need to be really careful on discretion for kind of equitable, leaving the kind of the goal on some of these administrative areas is not to have too much discretion. But there are some, when we would have to have a basis by which we implement discretion, right? So it can be done. And maybe when we get into this, we get closer to having something, we can take that into account and figure out which ones are kind of legally able to have that discretion and which ones really are, going to need to be a set fee. When you get into the land use things, those are challenging to track. I can definitely understand the idea behind a base plus thing, but that is it's an administrative challenge, and it's also uncertainty to the applicant of knowing, well, what am I going to be charged? Is it a 2,000 or is it 10,000? So I think there's a mixture here on discretion, but also clarity for the customer.
You do have some that have a range already.
Yeah. Yep. We just need to describe, how we implement that range.
Thank you. Since we're avoiding discretion, which I get that, I think that's good. The special event application just says varies. And if we get rid of the notes, you got nothing. And then, how do we determine that? That's on page 3.
Yeah, go for it.
Towards the top.
The special event application requires a $200 deposit and an application fee. Once that is paid, the application goes through Public Works, Fire, Administration, and Police. And depending on the event and what services they are needing from the city, there's a price calculated off of our billable hours by finance and quoted. And so that's why it varies.
And that is a challenge with doing a kind of this unified fee schedule is, you see the resolution that is referenced there. That's where it spells out some of the other stuff that's kind of behind the curtain for how those are calculated. And yeah, and as Sammy said, it's it does vary wildly depending upon what services they're either asking for from the city or that we require them to do for public safety. Some of them are at a request and say they're optional, we do them and here's what it costs. And some will be, we are doing this because we're going to impose that requirement on you to do that service as part of the event.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
So then in the notes column, it says $25 deposit rate set by policy. With the parentheses after policy, maybe, what's it $25 for? And then if it's separate, we're on the same page. It's page 3 at the top, well, towards the top. Right where draft starts.
I think the $25 deposit set by policy is under for public records requests. Right? So
Oh, well,
special-
my finger's in
yeah,
the wrong spot.
yeah.
Oh, good eye. Thank
Which
you.
is another one that it depends on what they're requesting. Yeah.
Pay no attention to the guy.
Counselor Lehman.
So what is the maximum we charge for the use of the park? Is it also varied on the number of hours that it's in use?
Yeah, it does vary on every one of them is different. I think probably the highest I've seen since I've been here was for a big bike marathon or the European car show maybe. And so it can get up between $1,200 to $1,500, but they wanted night security officers that they had through the city. They had all kinds of specific things that they wanted. Majority of our current applications, we waive the fees, they're city sponsored events. So there's not a lot of revenue that comes back off of those.
So on ones where there's a commercial enterprise, and we're doing city services with police and with maintenance, do we lose money? Does the fees that we receive less than what our actual services are?
At the discretion of the department heads and the city administrator, and it's done off of their billable rate, so.
Yeah, you would probably require those events to kind of do an audit afterwards to see, did what we billed, what we expected to have to do from a staffing standpoint for the event versus what we ended up doing. My guess would be probably win some, lose some and see what it averages out. I would imagine that there are some, and it's hard to know when an actual problem happens. Is that billed to the event? Is it, it'd be interesting to do an audit of a few to see, did our estimate for the number of hours that we will provide to that particular event, was that accurate? Did we under or overcharge? And again, at some point, some of that can be de minimis to the revenue difference between them. And I think what we're trying to do is provide kind of a baseline level of clarity about what it would cost to get services, and then also not track them to the point where we're spending, an equal amount of time on the tracking as we are getting the revenue.
My last comment on this, to go back to, if we're having weddings there where people are paying $4,000, $5,000, $7,000 to have a venue in a park-like setting that has amenities, I just hate to see either citizens losing out on time in their parks during the spring, summer, fall months, and then also the under generating revenue commensurate to what the marketplace is out there for wedding events.
Yeah, I think we need to look at what is commensurate, how commensurate is the park to other venues, with the parking differences and what's exclusive to the privacy and, all those different factors. But yeah, that use of the parks is definitely has its own set of, and that needs some policy. Ultimately there's a lot of policy direction wrapped up in that, because you're right, there's potential revenue there if the market, if it's priced just right, but there's also, is that, how much time do you want the parks utilized for non-public use? So that is a lot of policy wrapped up in it for sure.
Do we really have a denial process based on what criteria?
There.
Yeah, there's several different ways to deny an application. I mean, it would have to go through the whole process, but Public Works can deny it, the police chief can deny it, city administrator or the fire. It can be not denied or not, the calendar date's not available.
Counselor Smith.
One of the things that we had talked about when we first started reserving the parks was that was one of the main concerns, is that our citizens would not have access to the parks because they were always reserved. And we sort of at that time talked about, not as council, but just in the general discussion of should we allow for reservations or leave it as it is. One of the things we talked about is if there was public input that people felt their parks were not available, we would look at it and then from that input, decide if if we're only gonna rent them X number of weekends or days out of the year. Or if there was public input, but also to look at how often, we've got the history of how often our parks are rented. And they're rented quite a bit, but there's also a whole lot of free time, because usually it's only a birthday party or it's very seldom a full day. I don't think hardly ever a full weekend. That was that was part of the data that we wanted kept so that we could look at it down the road to see how it went.
Sounds like we had lots of things to pull together before we really finalize and come back to the fee structure in the spring.
Yeah, and if there is interest in that particular topic, I think, that's a great one to get your advisory committee, involvement in, and do some policy recommendation. So then the
That would be
council,
The Parks and
Trees, yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be a good,
To the best of my knowledge, and I'm only one person, but I haven't heard complaints about, oh, we don't have enough parks available. I mean, we have multiple parks now. We're so fortunate.
And there hadn't been anything while I was on Parks and Place
Okay.
that came in that was a negative comment. People kind of enjoyed knowing if they planned a birthday party at the structure. It
Right.
was posted, Public Works did a great job of always posting it so people knew.
And that's just that sort of one area of the park, so.
yeah, that's what I was gonna add, is it exclusive to the entirety of a park, or is it just the kind of the more formal, infrastructure sections? And yeah, there's a lot of variables to that as well.
Great discussion. Do we have anyone registered or signed up to provide testimony? Not, I will close the public hearing at 6:43. And entertain a motion at this point.
I move to adopt resolution 2023-16, a resolution adopting administrative surcharges, administrative fees, planning and development charges, including the 2023 fee schedule.
Have a second. For Wells. So we have a motion by Counselor Fox and a second by Counselor Wells to adopt resolution 2023-16, a resolution adopting administrative surcharges, administrative fees, and planning and development charges, included in the 2023 City of Coburg fee schedule. All those in favor? Raise your hands. 5 in favor, any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Great discussion and, lots of work. And Councilor Lehman, thank you for reminding us that in our budget meetings last spring, one of the questions was, how do we generate more revenue within our city, and how do we keep everything in place that we want to keep going?
It's very economical to buy 1,000 gallons of water for $1. Schedule.
Yeah, to rent for $100
That's before.
still.
And that's only the little square cover.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
Has to go a special event.
Permit is needed to rent any of the grass area.
Whole park.
And you cannot rent the bathrooms or the play structure area. And you can't have alcohol near those two areas.
Right.
Counselor Fox.
But I did hear that the auto show
was $1,500, which included police officers from Eugene. And that $1,500?
No.
No, it was our officers when we did it for $1,500, but that was the European car show, so that's been years ago. That we were at that rate.
Any council action items remaining? Oh, I guess it would be the handout on chapter 30 of the Oregon Municipal Handbook, the abuse reporting. So if you'd like to review that in your own time, or if you have, do you have any questions about that? And it's both for children and elder abuse. And we will send out the website to take a look at.
Yeah, I think the website is,
Is
we
it
could,
in here?
yeah, we can send out a
Okay.
live link on a kind of the end of the week kind of thing as well, but it is in there to,
Oh, yes, it is.
to grab if you want.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. DHS provides further information and guidance and training related to elder abuse and child abuse on its website. And I think the descriptors are pretty good, and there is a hotline. So any reports can go to that hotline and they can go in anonymously. Though they will not guarantee your anonymity if the case should come to trial, as I. Counselor Smith, you were a mandatory reporter for years also.
And I think one of the fallacies that we often run into is people would call and report something and assume that it was us that would make the report, and you cannot do a second-hand report. The person witnessing
Good point.
the abuse or the results of abuse have got to make the report. And it was really important when someone reported to us that we made the clarification that we were unable to make that report on their behalf. So just, if you're out there and somebody says something that reporting it to you does not relieve them of their liability to report it to the agency.
Thanks for that clarification. Administrative information reports. Mr. Hanks will present and bring staff in as needed.
Yeah, I'll probably immediately kick this first one over to the city recorder, to Sammy. She coordinates our citizen inquiry process. All of us have some role or hand in that typically, but Sammy keeps them on track and make sure we finish them and close the loop and report back. The staff report just kind of quickly gives the process that is used to run through the cycle and make sure that we're catching those. And then the spreadsheet has what has been done for this quarter.
So this quarter spans July through the end of September. Counselor Lehman.
Just a larger question in this whole issue is, basically what we have is a system of compliance driven by citizen inquiry. But we also have staff observations of non-compliance or enforcement issues, which leaves up to discretion as to whether to act on it or not to act on it, whether it's based because of time restraints or resources or whatever. I just would like at some point in time a larger discussion about what our expectations are as a staff when, as a council, when we have staff that see non-compliance issues. Is it a default to wait till we get a citizen inquiry on it? Or to what degree do we take initiative to bring that to the attention of the offender?
You had something specific in mind?
Well, we had a conversation about a number of these. For example, we have the pathway going out around our development there, where we have, two households that built their fence with gates that open up to the
Oh.
pathway. And they drive their RV and their boat through there. And they go across public right of way, they create, ditches, or they mess up the, they actually put their own gravel on our lawn. They have a perfect right to drive out their front driveway to access their RV and their boat.
That would be the neighborhood that backs up to Bottom Loop.
So that's just a number of things like that that we know are non-compliance, but either it takes a citizen inquiry to get a formal response and corrective action, as opposed to whether we take the initiative to say that's a non-compliance. And
I think we actually did follow up on that, if I recall correctly. No, okay, sorry.
Yeah, so, in general, I think, we had a good conversation, I think, and I did a lot of compliance work, back in the day, a number of years ago and throughout, my time. And the idea of what is complaint driven and what is proactive, enforcement is a good question. And there are, some of that gets into resources, what resources are available, because as someone who has done code enforcement a long time, in the community I was in, I could walk a block and find 10 violations. Are they substantial? Are they impactful to the neighborhood? Are they, public safety issues? Are they, as you're describing, potential public infrastructure damaging issues? There's a whole kind of matrix of conversation that could be had about that. I think it is challenging. The default that is the most straightforward is complaint-based, except for public safety items. And then there also is, stuff in the right of way, things that happen in the right of way is kind of it's code enforcement, but that is by default what's happening on land that we're stewards for the governing body to handle. So yeah, we definitely could have more of a conversation about how we do that and what resources are involved. And there's depth to that conversation for sure.
at minimum, a letter of acknowledgement from the city to the household that this is non-compliance.
And I think the largest right of way on that property, so on the bottom loop side of the path, I believe that is county right of way. That's not city right of way. The city right of way, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the city right of way is from their fence to the path.
Right, yeah.
The path is the city's, but beyond the path, the green strip between the path and bottom loop is county. So, and I believe from previous conversations that the path is designed well enough to withstand occasional, anyway, motor vehicle traffic.
Yeah, and really the conversation too is there a code that's being violated or not is another question. Some are more straightforward than others. This one, the gates are not a violation. Somebody could have a gate that goes out to that right of way. Putting gravel down to on city right of way, that does happen in many, many places. This is different. It's a little bit because visually it's different because it's a path, a landscape area, and then their fence line, but gravel that people put out their own gravel in their front right of way before the asphalt. So you have to kind of figure out what is uniquely different in a problem, with this particular example. I would say the violation may be a kind of more of a traffic, and a violation. Yeah. I mean, so it's maybe a little more nuanced than it might look. And then the remedies, what are we requiring them to do? We could scrape the gravel and tell them you can't drive on this. So that but I don't know that we have, it's not kind of the classic code enforcement case. But those are clearly issues, that we can address. And I'm not sure that it needs to be, I mean, those can just be brought up and brought to our attention as you have, and we can address those and update you on them. It doesn't require, a complaint to be made, and clearly as council, especially, my preference is having the conversation this way when it's with the council instead of an individual counselor, to take direction. And then we know priorities, of the council.
I was just gonna ask, is this supposed to be the multimodal path for like walking and biking that they're driving on? I'm wondering if that's the part where there's a violation
Drive
happening.
across.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
using motor vehicle on on a path that's supposed to be for non.
And the violation at that point is a police department thing when they're driving on it. We can send them a notice and say that you should not be. If they continue to do that, we can't issue a fine for, for what is there. We can issue a fine, a ticket for the behavior if it truly is a traffic violation, which I think would be here, that it's not a street. It's not a legal driveway access, they have their subdivision approval, didn't approve it, all those things. So there is a pathway to compliance. It's just different than, weed abatement or, noxious vegetation or something that is, does it exist? Yes, no, here's the code section. You have X number of days citation. But that doesn't mean that there aren't able to be followed up on.
Let's take a look at that
Yep.
and see what we can do.
We can report back to you on that.
Well, if they're notified of actually driving a vehicle over Covert Loop path, if they're notified that if they damage it, that they're financially responsible for the repairs. I don't know if there's, if there's a deterrent that could be put out there, but it seems like, if that concrete starts to crack or fail because there's a vehicle driven over it often enough, they should know that.
Yeah, and the challenge is being able to
Right.
connect those dots,
Right.
legally, when you're following through with code enforcement, you are in a municipal court and you have to prove the cause and effect and all of that. So, but I think, obviously what I prefer it to be is code compliance, not code enforcement, which involves that educational piece first to say, here's the issue, here are the concerns and the reasons why it's not allowed. And if it's blatantly violated and continue to do it, then we have, plan B or plan C, and it eventually does get to code enforcement. But the first few steps are typically, I think the best path is a code compliance path.
We also have a driveway that, where is it? It's out on Austin, I believe, where the house is built and there's the driveway and you have to back over the multimodal path every time they go in and out. And it was built that way, and I think that the path there was actually reinforced in a way that would allow that.
Yeah, if it was platted with that to occur, it probably was designed in that case.
Lots of fox.
Yeah, I didn't know I was gonna weigh in on this, but yeah, I was at the very beginning on the path thing, and although it's like wide enough for a car, the intent of multimodal was never an automobile, except for maintenance crew with a four-wheeler or a golf course or something.
Yeah,
Or an RV.
no, I think it's clear that particular area and piece of infrastructure that was developed was not developed for that intention. And I don't think there's any debate there.
Yeah, they said the weight would. And I have a second thing, but
Yes.
I want to make sure we're moving on from this. I'm very curious.
What's your other thing?
The speed bump on Coleman, was that the Northwest Natural Repair that was?
Oh,
No, I think that was a request for one.
Oh,
Yes,
on the north end of Coleman.
yes. So the dialogue actually, that actually ties into an earlier item on the agenda, the transportation ad hoc. I had Chief Larson went to that individual's home and spoke with him at his house, had a great dialogue, showed him some of the data from the traffic trailer that we have, the speed trailer, which actually, showed that the speeds at the 95 percentile, I think, or 96 percentile were at or below the speed limit. So it was actually, the data did not prove out the person's concerns. Doesn't mean that zero people sped, but it generally didn't. And I followed up then with an email exchange with them as well to talk about kind of the broader implications of traffic control devices such as speed bumps or speed cushions and all those things, and the need to look at that more broadly than just section of street by section of street. And that really gets to some of the things I think the transportation ad hoc that was specifically Coleman, it was listed in the bullet, and that really did come out of, wasn't just that person, but it actually relates to the work session conversation about impacts of existing neighborhoods adjacent to newer subdivisions, and this is one of those. So yeah, that was a component of that transportation ad hoc bullet list.
Anything else? Other questions? We'll move on.
I think under the administrative.
Stole your mandatory reporting. I apologize.
You did, that's okay. And I stole Sammy's citizen quarterly report.
We're just working together. It's a cooperative effort.
The last one on there on the list is the administration monthly report that I emailed yesterday and is in the red folder. I don't know if I need to, want me to hit on it. I think Mayor mentioned some of the Springbrook efforts that we're going into. Finance Director Greg and I have been digging into Springbrook on the general ledger side of things, payroll, accounts payable, to see what greater utilization of that software that we can put in place. We're also looking at enhancements in the utility billing side of Springbrook with the citizen portal. We submitted our stuff. We'll see what our implementation schedule ends up being. We're hopeful to have that up by January 1st, but some of that's dependent upon when we get in the queue for Springbrook to do that implementation work. So, to kind of back the mayor's prior point is Springbrook has been around for a long time. Had a great reputation. I'll pause.
Interrupt, man. What is Springbrook?
Springbrook is the city's software. It's the city's general ledger kind of financial systems, the ERP. It's primarily the core software that operates all the financial auxiliary pieces to the city. And there are a number of products. They live kind of in that middle realm, not for the, that it's a really good product for a budget in a community of this size. It's not so great when you get into large cities. Other products are the market leaders in the larger city space. They have had a history. They were really good for a while. They were sold as and were kind of starved of R&D and did not perform well. Lost a bunch of customers. Really, then got sold again, probably cheap. And a lot of reinvestment has been done in the last 3 to 5 years, and it's returned to be a really solid product. So I think we're in fine shape with Springbrook as a core financial system. We're evaluating, how we leverage it, and they put a new front end interface in just recently. We did a little webinar on that. So I think it's solid, and I think we can leverage it more. And that's really what we're exploring, is kind of in what order of operation do we enhance and leverage Springbrook a little bit more in our operations. And I mentioned a couple, iWorks is a tool that Public Works has used for a while. There's an opportunity to use that for our citizen inquiry process. They have a module for code compliance that I think might be a little more streamlined and efficient to use, which should also give the ability for online customer entries. Instead of coming in and filling out the form at City Hall, they can apply, and provide their complaint online. and then using that maybe for some other things too as well in our fleet, and using that for fleet management. So just a bunch of things we're looking at and evaluating and seeing what we have the capacity to do. We won't want to get ahead of ourselves on seeing all kinds of great things we can do, but not having the staff capacity to bite it all off at the same time. So that's a continuing conversation with all of us at the leadership team. The Cobra Loop path update, that one just happened. So I just wanted to get that out there to you. Brian and I recently had a meeting with the City of Eugene project team that is managing that project on our behalf. And there'll be some decision making, I think, or revisiting prior decisions, at least as a minimum, coming up hopefully next month if we get all the material back together, because it involves a potential change in the match, the local match for the project in order to keep it at its fully intended, at its originally intended project scope versus the alternate that was a cost reduction path. So we got some additional funding, which was great. It just means that also because it's a ratio of the match, it means that we have to match our 10 or 11% of that funding. So that's a decision of council. So that one will come back and they want it. They're still hopeful to construct that in the summer of 24. So that's why I originally thought we could have the transportation ad hoc weigh in on that, but that wouldn't meet the timeframes that they want for construction. So that'll be coming back to you next month. Just wanted to give you a little update on that. And then the franchise agreements are kind of course of business stuff. Those are several of the franchise agreements are coming up for renewal. And, you know, again, depending upon what they're asking for, if anything, some will come in with just a straight renewal, and we'll review to see if there's anything that's deficient from our end that isn't best practice that we might want to propose. But those often will have quite a bit of a back and forth between that particular utilities legal side and us. Our team plus legal review. So I'm not exactly sure when they'll show up on a council agenda, but that's just a workload item that we're sorting, we're moving forward on. And then the League of Oregon Cities, I'll be there on Thursday and Friday. Luckily it's in Eugene, not bad on the travel. So I get to bounce in and out of that. And the voting delegate, this one is not the voting for legislative priorities that you see. This one is voting for board members for the League of Oregon Cities board. So it's a little more administrative. It doesn't have that policy stuff. So when we get to that spot, when they ask for cities to chime in on the legislative priorities, that doesn't end up being a staff thing. That's definitely something we bring to council to kind of do that ranking. I'm sure you guys have done that before. Yeah, that's so that usually is prior to a legislative session. So this one's a little bit different. And then behind that are the reports, statistical reports from the departments, and we've got the experts at the back of the room that can answer any questions that I don't have answers to, if you have any.
I'm always amazed at how busy our police department is. I really am truly amazed. There's a lot of stuff that happens that we as citizens don't know about. And thank you. Thank you that we don't know about them in most cases. And then also the good stuff, the trunk or treat, the Halloween patrol. I've had family members that have brought my little kids out, and they're very impressed that there are police around and that everybody takes it very seriously. And the parents' night out, I know that you just love that. It's a wild and crazy time. We should all stop in and join you for that. And then shop with a cop, and that's an opportunity for us as citizens to donate to that fund, to be able to extend those opportunities. Now I'll stop. But again, when I look at Public Works, I'm truly amazed at what happens in this small town. Councilor Lehman.
Speaking of Public Works, we had a fire on our street sweeper. Is it all fixed and is it up and running again? And what kind of usage are we doing on that? How often does it get?
You have to get away from the kids' table, Brian.
I've only seen it once down our street, so I just don't know what the schedule is.
So we do, the second, third and fourth Thursdays of the month. Typically we save that last one for, the main street area. There's gonna be some time, for, those guys operating that piece of equipment to get used to it, to get comfortable working around traffic and things like that. So, just be patient. Once they get a really good handle on it, we might be able to get a lot more swept on a Thursday than we do right now. For each one of those zones, it takes them pretty much all day. Once they get used to it, it will take them a shorter amount of time, and we may be able to get a few more streets swept. But there again, we're trying to avoid those areas or those streets that are in very poor condition. So we won't be sweeping in those areas. It'll just be areas where the asphalt is newer, intact.
Yeah.
Yes.
How will that impact with all of the leaves falling? How does that impact the street sweeping?
So the machine just has to go a little bit slower to pick up those. But we did buy a machine that has a vacuum attachment on it. So we plan on utilizing the street sweeper during leaf pickup season this year.
But all of the leaves that are in the street already, I mean, that's not part of the leaf pickup.
No, so they will, that street sweeper does a pretty good job of picking them up. It's just, like I said, the crew has to get used to
Sure.
identifying, you know, if the header's plugged or if they're pushing a pile, you know, what do I do then? So once they get used to and the feel of it, it'll look a lot better. It already looks great, especially once they're done sweeping, but once they get a really good feel for it, usually there's one in every public works department, there's one person that kind of rises to the top of who normally gets to run the street sweeper because they just, you know, have a knack for it.
Kind of like a combine. I think.
Yep,
Yeah.
it is a lot like that, yep.
The more material, of course, that's in the street means the quicker they have to go dump, you know, the less they can do
Right.
without doing a dump, so.
Yeah, and just so you know, we had to buy a smaller unit because larger units require CDLs. The only person in public works with a CDL is myself. So in order to have that non-CDL vehicle, we got a smaller unit, has a smaller hopper, so they have to dump more frequently. So
So does
that
the
was just built into the
dump truck
program.
come close to where they are, or do they?
No, we just go right back out to the treatment plant. Typically the spoils just look like gravels. And that really is it. A lot of times we can reuse those gravels in road beds.
I was gonna say,
Yep,
that great source.
yep. We just have to run a magnet over it every once in a while, pick up nails or anything that's been dropped on the road.
Where do you go to dump it?
The treatment plant right now. So yeah, there's just probably maybe 15 yards so far of material that we've picked up. And it just really looks like just like fine sands and gravels.
That's a lot.
I had a CDL in Colorado, it wasn't that hard to get.
How long ago was that? Cause it's a little bit harder these days. You actually have to go to, when I got my CDL, you just practiced, went and took the test and they gave it to you. Now you have to actually go to school. There's a school you have to go to.
Never mind.
You were thinking of a second job there?
No, I was in a bigger unit, you didn't have to drive back to the facility that much.
Yes,
So
sir.
when you go out on Thursdays, second, third and fourth Thursdays, how long of a work schedule is that for the person? Is it an all-day thing or?
Yeah, right now it's an all-day thing and we
Do you
just
have to do
kind of,
several trips to fill up the
Yep.
tank too?
yep, the water, yep. So, and you gotta be careful when it's, you know, really rainy out. You really can't sweep when it's really rainy out. You can, it's just that stuff kind of flows out of the hopper, the water does. So the material may stay in there, but it can create a mess if you're not careful.
There's a
So,
lot to it.
yep,
And-
But
and I
they're
think
doing a really good job
the
learning how to use it.
schedule is out on the city website.
I didn't see it. We've been talking about updating the website, but it's
Okay.
not.
Okay.
It's on Facebook.
It was
We did have it
posted
on
somewhere.
Facebook,
Yeah.
but we took it down when the fire happened or we quit promoting it. So we can,
Okay.
I'll work with Brian and get it back on there.
It is the second, third and fourth Thursday, right, Sammy?
I remember it's a
that's right.
Thursday because,
There's 3 Thursdays of the
Yeah.
month. Right.
because I know you've come down Abby and Austin. and
Yep.
It looked great. I remember it was early Thursday morning. I was up. I mean, that wasn't a problem. I wasn't that early. It was after.
Yeah,
7:30.
we've been trying to stay past 6 o'clock, not earlier. A lot of cities will sweep like a graveyard shift. Just to avoid that heavy traffic. We're trying to avoid the noise from that piece of equipment running up and down the road because an air sweeper, which we have, is a lot noisier than an old mechanical sweeper that where you're just really hearing that brush, sweep, but that blower motor running, there's a lot more noise to it. So we're trying to avoid that waking people up at 3 o'clock in the
It's
morning.
not nearly as noisy as that pickup that comes in beside my house periodically, so it's okay. Just saying. Anything else? Question? Oh, Council Lehman.
I seem to remember, did we have discussion or is there some plans where we're gonna have mechanical lights or for crossing?
Yes.
Yes, Brian, I'll maybe get some work here back and forth, but I can answer the first part of that. Yeah. Brian and I are working on finishing out the permit process with the county and purchasing the 2 of the flashers, crosswalks for McKinsey, Willamette McKinsey. Hoping, still planning to have those up this fall.
And they're similar to what we see in Eugene going down Franklin or in Springfield. Where you push a button and the lights flash and allows the person to go through.
It's
like
very similar to
Yeah.
what's over by the fire station.
Yep.
Very similar. The only difference is these will be solar. Those are powered through pole power. So, and they communicate with each other via radio.
I guess I'm not familiar with what's over the fire station. That's.
Well, the crosswalk that crosses.
Pearl and Willamette has one as well. Well, they have push buttons. So they don't flash, no.
Oh,
Yeah, the flashing ones are near the fire station. And again, to plug for what you've already set up is that transportation ad hoc. I think that's an opportunity to look at where other locations as we look at budgets and future. You can overkill on them, but where are they most strategically placed? And I think that's another one that the ad hoc could look at.
well, it's not the flashing, but it's more a stop and go crosswalk for the pedestrian.
No, it flashes. It
It
flashes.
is flashing for, okay.
Mm.
Just seems like we've had just a lot more traffic in the last month or so for some reason, just trying to get out on Abbey Road, just onto the main road. There's sometimes waiting for 15, 20, 25 cars to pass before you access. It's a lot of traffic.
Even that,
Not
some
for
of the
the- not for
commuters
the
might get
pedestrian.
tired of waiting and go a faster way.
It's a busy street. They're true. Busy road. What else? Any other questions about the statistics or the administrative report? I'll let you go home here,
One other thing is I think about the safety, the Transportation Safety Committee. I think that around our park area where people take the shortcut, they don't want to go back out on Willamette and hit the light. I think if that committee could really look at how we could slow traffic down or do a left turn only out of the street there by the Grange also. Because they go that way, they cut to miss the light. They just blow down past that park. So I think the perimeter of the park, it would be really nice to really give that some special attention as to whether it's a little, little speed cushions or something. Because it's come popping out there by the restroom and cars are just.
Yeah, I think that fits generally under that neighborhood, the citywide speed and I think strategies, traffic change strategies can fit into that. Because those are good. Definitely.
Anything else? Any other comments? You want upcoming agenda items will be the quarterly financial report, the quarterly police report, the natural hazard mitigation plan adoption, pavilion park improvements, contract award, and agreement with Main Streets. And would we expect those in November? At least some of
Potentially,
them.
yes. And then I'll add, the Cobra Loop path, that'll show up, real soon. So we'll update this and get a better, longer range, document out to you. The Main Street contract, because it has to go back to their board too, it's probably not going to be November. We will have that purchasing ordinance update that we talked about that we're using our contract legal team. Not exactly sure when that'll come back. Probably not November. And then we have some more equipment surplus that I hope does come back in November to address some more vehicle situation. And yeah, that's all I had written as the additionals. And we'll get you a little more of a longer range document updated. We have it going. We just need to get it cleaned up and out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot of work. It's exciting to see the start on the Veterans Memorial area. Pretty happy. I've gotten some questions about what's going on there. And so people seem to be pretty excited about that. There will be ADA compliant paths. The Parks and Tree Committee has done a lot of work on that. It'll all be managed in-house as I understand, and Public Works will be doing a lot of work and as well as the Parks and Tree Committee. So
The rain slowed us down a little bit, but
Yeah, right.
right when we started digging it up, but
it'll be a beautiful add-on to the city. Excited about that.
Yeah,
Councilor
definitely.
Aldrich.
Also, there's a city event coming up, right? Main Streets event coming up on
Yes,
this Friday?
the Scarecrow event. Yes, it's Friday. That's true. Yes.
Afternoon, evening?
It's
Anybody who knows?
evening.
At
I
5.
did not
think
bring that with me. At
5 to 8, I
and
think, yeah.
From 6 to 8 and fire pits and smoke
Yeah.
pits and a run. Words
Oh,
for the
yeah, there's
heaviest
a pumpkin
the
run. You have to
fastest
run with
pumpkin.
the pumpkin.
There's a
multiple
already-
days.
A lot of
Yeah.
people signed up for the run already. I think Megan reported today that we're already on that event. At this point, with all the stuff she's bought, we're still $2,000 in the black.
Wow. That's.
That one's, I
great
think, on the
report.
27th or 28th is the run. Yeah.
You have to carry a pumpkin. It can be a big pumpkin
Can be
or a little
whatever.
pumpkin.
Or isn't it the award is first pumpkin across and biggest pumpkin across, I think is what I understood the award to be. Yeah.
Friday is the kickoff, and that will, I think we'll be announcing winners of the Scarecrow competition, if I recall correctly, and then a band and just, so we're hoping for good weather.
And Harry's donated all the pumpkins and said that when you're done, you're more than welcome to bring them back. So we don't have to deal with what to do with
Oh,
all
that's
the
really
pumpkins.
good. My chickens eat pumpkins. Okay, well, If there's nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:26.